How do you permanently get rid of Candida 100% once and for all?
Sugar's got to be a word that you don't know how to spell anymore. You don't know how to say. You don't know how to go near. So everything I just mentioned about 8, 10 minutes ago, all the pastas and the breads and the potatoes have to go. Sugars have to go, including fruit. There's not a sugar that's not going to feed Candida or cancer or anything else. So the fact of the matter is that's got to go out of your diet. It's very difficult. And I may say this, after all these decades, we knew what, maybe 40 years, 45 years, we've known what Candida is. It's harder to get rid of that than some forms of cancer. It's really difficult. So picture it, I wrote this in one of my books, as being gasoline spilling on the entire floor of the room you're sitting in now listening to us. Think about this yourself. Now, let's say we freak out and there's 20 of us there. We all get on our knees and we take rags and we clean it, we clean it, we clean it, we clean it. And 99% of that gasoline's gone. But somebody forgets an hour later and they light a match, and in the very corners, we didn't get 100% of it up, it ignites the room. So the problem with Candida, you got to beat the hell out of this thing and eradicate it, or it's just going to come back with vengeance on you. And I've seen the best case, classic case I saw. We had a woman that literally was measured, went to one of the best doctors in the country, if not in the world, on that one. She was measured completely well of Candida. She had no markers, none of the evidence of it. And she went on a cruise with her husband, and she didn't eat crappy food. She ate healthy food, but she took cake 2 times on a 7-day cruise, and she had a measurable level that went up to 20% of what it originally was from eating cake twice. That was where my hypothesis was proven that day. Now, since then, I've seen 100 other people do the same thing, but the fact is, it's a tough one, but you better get rid of it, because it's not only a foggy mind, but we now know that Candida leads to other diseases because it's suppressing the immune system. And when you suppress the immune system, opportunistic disorders just get right into your body and take over.
How do you protect your thyroid, and what supplements should we take? Should we take iodine, or can that cause thyroid problems?
Well, 300 years ago in Europe, the selenium and iodine was pretty much gone from the soil. Now remember, iodine was only in soil that was close to oceans. So we call the breadbasket, where we got much of the food here in the United States, it never really had any measurable iodine in the soil. Where the coast of New England, the coast of the central East Coast, California, Washington State, they had it. But it was farmed out in Europe 300 years ago, farmed out here in the 19th century. And so the 2 most important elements for not only the thyroid, but the entire endocrine system, which also includes the lymphatic system, is iodine and selenium. So this is something you should supplement with. Now, here's what you were just mentioning, which is ironic. You require the iodine and the selenium, but when you have a thyroid that breaks, it either goes hypo, too active, or hyper, underactive. Then when you take traditional iodine supplements, it's not good, because the gland can no longer handle it, because you haven't given it to it, it's not familiar with it, so it's putting in a foreign substance and it overreacts to it. So a colleague of mine, who's often at The Real Truth About Health, Dr. Cousins, and one of his genius friends pulled together an ionic form, a protomic level, a very minute level of iodine that we've been using for women and men here for a long time, very, very successfully. So you've got to sneak it back in so it gets into the gland, so you give that support. But there's so many factors for the plague of thyroid concerns today. Cell phones, the batteries here, laptop computers, working in front of computers all day long, being in a city where cell towers and you're bombarded constantly. I mean, it's just an endless array of bad things that are happening. Chemicals, fluoride in the water, a biggie. It doesn't help your teeth, but it does help you, give you cancer and thyroid problems. All of these are, and so the number now, we estimate that 70% of women have some kind of a thyroid disorder, either full blast or they're at a border of it. About 20% of men, and if you had told me that 30, 40 years ago, I would have laughed, because it was such a small amount of men I saw. I never saw them practically. Today it's 20% of us. And it's going to get worse. because the malnutrition is getting worse and the electronic age is growing.
How does a man protect against prostate problems?
Sex, and I don't say that jokingly, but in my book, 7 Ways to Lifelong Sexual Vitality, we put research studies out. So men that are sexually active have far less prostate problems. As Harvard pointed out, it's high fat diets, high saturated animal fat diets. I guess you could do it on coconut oil too, which is a saturated fat, palm oils, which is packed into everything today. As a matter of fact, the biggest cause of the rainforest degradation is they're growing palm oils. I had a business meeting in Costa Rica, and I looked down at what it is, all palm oil, destroying the environment completely. But more importantly, animal fats do it. They show that 92-93% of the men that had prostate cancer had high lipids in their blood. And so those two things are overwhelmingly the factor. Active sexually, as well as not having a lot of animal fat. Now, I think there's an emotional component to this. I mean, if I go back to the 70s when I began my work, it was very seldom I saw anyone with prostate cancer or prostate problems, even swollen problems. It happened, but not often. What happened is women, thank goodness, received their voice around then and started to actually stand up for themselves. And men were in ultra control of the family, of women, of society. And I think it assaulted us. Like I see breast cancer relating to emotional concerns when women have trauma or they're abused in some way or they don't feel loved. Men did the same thing. So that was the decade I started to see this thing go. By the 80s, it started to go and hasn't stopped. It's like skyrocketing. And they say this, and I'm not sure I don't agree with it. I can't say this is confirmed as truth. But if a man lives long enough under the conditions we're putting ourselves through today, they'll probably end up with prostate cancer. You don't have to die from it. I see more men die from prostate cancer when they do the conventional treatment than I do who have it and live with it. That's where they spread it to the liver and the bones and everything else. And the most important of all tests is called the Gleason test. They don't only poke you with a biopsy once. I've seen actually men were poked over 20 times. Imagine spilling all of this. But you have to really understand this. It's also having nothing to do with testosterone like they claim to you. They put you on female hormones. What a joke this is. It's almost astronomically stupid. And why? Because if it were true that high testosterone gave you prostate cancer, why doesn't every 20-year-old kid have prostate cancer? Why does it take till 50, 60, 70 years old for guys to display it? And when their testosterone is 1/3 of what it was 40, 50 years before. And a good friend of mine basically discovered that in the 60s and laughed, a renowned doctor, by the way, laughed at them and said, this is crazy. And, they're still playing the game. They look at the PSA. Legitimate doctors don't look at PSA as a valid thing. PSA may indicate you have a swollen prostate. Doesn't always mean you have cancer and have outrageous numbers. It could mean you have cancer. But, the other test is then these biopsies, which are problematic. Or wait and see. Stand by and see. That's usually the right approach. If there's not a fire, don't put a fire out. You don't go to your house every day and hose it down with a fire hose, do you? In case there's a fire.
If someone is not going to eat a raw food diet, then which cooked foods do you recommend between sprouted whole grains like quinoa or millet, cooked squash, cooked potatoes, and sprouted cooked beans? Are any of these better or worse among cooked whole foods?
Well, you just named some of the cooked foods that I eat. About 10-15% of my diet is cooked, not because I'm sacrilegious, because it's okay, you're healthy. Now, if you're sick, if you're fighting one of these magnitude diseases, you have to be 100% raw until you heal. And then guess what? You could eat 10-15% of your diet is cooked. So baked winter organic squashes, one of my big favorites. Why? It's a lot of water that fills you up and it has a lot of minerals in it. Everything else is pretty much cooked out of it. Plus that, the taste of those baked seeds, really delicious inside of them. Steamed vegetables, not a big problem. I happen to like in that squash sometimes putting peas. What's wrong with that? Nothing wrong with that. But it's the amounts you take. So when we were still in Boston, remember the Institute began in 1956 in Boston, we had a lot of volunteers from the major universities, MIT, Tufts University, Boston College. And they would actually go into the labs at night after work and they would do some research. And one of the most profound and important things, I wasn't really a researcher in it. I would go over and help with them. They found out that the breaking point for health is about 20 to 25% cooked food versus raw food. That if you go from 25% to 30% cooked food by weight, your immune system drops over 17%. I think what I've just said to you, these are measurable quantities we're talking about now. If you went up to 35%, only 10% more, it dropped to 48.7. So half your immune system was dysfunctional at this point. And it goes back to confirm what was done at the Pasteur Institute by Reshetnikov in the 1930s. He called that leukocytosis, leukocyte, white blood cell cytosis. And he showed that when you ate a cooked food, the immune system attacked it and compromised the immune system, no differently than it would a virus or a bacteria at that point, or a cancer, anything that the body's immune system protects you from dying from. And so you don't want to do that. So always stay under that 20%. I stay under 10, 15. 2 days a week I fast. I'm fasting right now as we interview. And you don't have to do 2 days. At least try to do 1 day. If you're not anorexic or bulimic or emaciated, there's reason within all of this too. And learn how to do it, and do it on raw green juices rather than plunge into a water fast, unless you're guided by a doctor, somebody who's an expert in these type of things. I think it's very important to realize how easy it is to eat a lot of raw food. In my book, Living Food for Optimum Health, I portray it with art. A 16-ounce green drink is very heavy. It weighs a pound approximately. Now, think of what's in there. 3, 4, 5 pounds of green organic food. In our green juice, it's half sprouts with these phytochemicals that fight disease. Now, a moderate-sized salad. I eat a large salad. Every night I eat a salad that big. That's a half a pound. You're up to 1.5 pounds of food. That's a lot of food, even if you're young. You could actually eat a half a pound of cooked food and be at 20, 25% versus who's going to eat a half a pound? You eat a quarter of a pound. Now you're at 85% raw food and 15% cooked food. Voila. If that's hard for you, either you're completely addicted to the wrong thing or didn't hear a word I said. This is easy to do.